Packing for Mars.
22nd May, 1962. We're on the planet Mars, and we have life.
The space program, as most people understand it, is completely a front.
They don't want us to know.
There's a monolith.
They deliberately smudged certain things.
There's a whole nother reality going on out there.
There really is another caste of the human race.
A breakaway civilization.
We're all coming forward with information and evidence that Alternative 3 is not some science fiction thing.
People go through their lives on autopilot all the time. You wake up, you make breakfast, you go off to work, you do your thing, you belong to the machine for 8 hours, you come home. But what people don't realize is that they need the truth.
Thank you for watching our TV, our Alpenparlament studio videos. We are recording now something which is very interesting. This is Packing for Mars. We have Frank Jacob and Tonia Madenford. You are a producer of films.
I'm the director of this film, Packing for Mars. And Tonia is a Hollywood producer, executive producer, and filmmaker. And we like to, on the one hand, produce things in the conventional system, such as, television shows, or Tonia does fiction films in Hollywood. But in our spare time and for our own recreational use, or for our own spiritual desire, or whatever you want to call it, our contribution to the awakening of consciousness, we like to make films about subjects which are forbidden.
Aha, but not by law.
Not by law, but by the pact between those who stand guard in the system of mediocrity and keeping us thinking in a certain box, and those who are wanting to shake up the box and wake us up to our fullest potential
of the spirit,
without any limitation.
What was your inspiration to do this film, this Packing for Mars?
My inspiration?
Was it your inspiration?
Well, it's, we came together in the course of making the film, but I guess the original inspiration originated with me because I had been given this book, Alternative 3. Now, this book is no ordinary book. It's a book based on a 1977 British television program which described a very secretive group of people who had more or less decided that humanity was not going to be able to clean up the environment and change their ways of being in time before it became extinct. So they decided to come up with alternatives, and one of those alternatives was to build a base on the planet Mars for a survival colony of humans to land and wait out until the problems, sorted themselves.
And who is privileged
on Earth.
Go to the Mars?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And the reason I decided to go and make a film about it was not because, I thought it was an interesting subject. It is an interesting subject, and it's a great book that followed the program. But what was interesting was that I'd heard an interview with the great-granddaughter of President Dwight D. Eisenhower, Laura Eisenhower, describing how she had been recruited for such a Mars colony. And I thought to myself, what? Is this is real? This book is real? Because the person who gave me the book, they said it's a true story masked as science fiction.
What if the majority of well-meaning scientists are actually basing their research on pre-screened, filtered data? What if the reality of Mars was so far from the official story that we would never believe it? Isn't history replete with stories of nation leaders that told us lies so big, so outrageous, no one could believe they were lies? They got away with it because we trust our leaders to tell the truth, and nothing but the truth. To believe the opposite requires us to set aside all convention and adopt a way of thinking that directly confronts the core of our trust in the whole system.
what's interesting about this whole premise of Alternative 3 is when we released Packing for Mars, this whole journey, our logline for the film is one man's journey for truth, because it really was one man grabbing a backpack, going out looking for the answers. And it was all inspired on Alternative 3, but we didn't know Leslie Watkins was still around. And so now it's been 40 years later, 2 weeks exact to the time we released Packing for Mars. I got an email from Graham Watkins, who's Leslie Watkins' son. And basically they were re-releasing Alternative 3 40 years after the sci-fi cult classic hit the airwaves. And they were bringing out all new information and relaunching this book. This was a great collaboration to be able to come out at the same time. We now have the book and the film with all this incredible information that even Leslie brought to the table. And as Frank had described, he had faced so many challenges. People that had come out of the woodwork asking him, how much do you know? You know, you really knew more than you had shared. Mae Brussels considered Alternative 3 the most dangerous book on her shelf. So,
Frank, can you explain to people what is Alternative 3, these 3 alternatives we have on this planet?
Well, as we know, the third alternative was going to Mars, but the other 2 alternatives were kind of interesting. And the first one was to just blast huge holes in the ionosphere to try and let the carbon gases and the greenhouse gases escape into outer space and thereby cooling down the planet. The problem with that, of course, was that although they had the technology to make holes into the ionosphere, they didn't have the technology to seal them back up again. So they didn't go that route, of course. The second alternative was to build giant underground cities where they would be able to pull a selected group of artists, doctors, scientists, and people that they would, live for many years in a sheltered environment away from the pollution and the chaos, while the world upstairs went its way to absolute annihilation and destruction. And then they would emerge, of course, later.
Could I be member too to this?
I'll ask Leslie. Maybe he can. But the funny thing is that the Alternative 2. It was ironic that the writers or the authors of the book and the film, or the book, thought that Alternative 2 was not feasible. But nowadays we hear so much about underground bases, deep underground bases, the DUMBs as they call them, deep underground military bases, which are around the planet. They're in Pine Gap in Australia, they're in Area 51 and
Ice Rock, probably Australia too.
They could be, exactly. They're apparently, this idea of the underground bases, I'm not so certain they didn't go this way either. The thing that was interesting is that it basically, for you to believe the premise or even entertain the idea that this could be going on, you have to accept the idea or be willing to go with the idea that technology as we know it, as it's sold to us on television in the mainstream and in our education system, is not the technology which is really being used by those who are running this program.
But how is this possible to hide these technologies? Those people, they are involved. How is this possible to keep it secret?
It's a very good question, and we call it the breakaway civilization. And this is a term that Richard Dolan, the famous American author, sort of coined. I don't know if he originally coined it, but he's one of the early users of this term, the breakaway civilization. Now, what is the breakaway civilization and how do they operate is kind of one of the things that we explore in the film.
Now, let's imagine the society that is involved in engaging all of this stuff. They have radically advanced technology. They have interactions with beings that most of us don't have the opportunity to have. They've developed a different worldview, I guarantee you, over what our place in the cosmos happens to be. Now ask yourself, what is a civilization? What characterizes a unique civilization? Well, that's a tough question to answer, but you can look at a couple of things. Levels of technology certainly are important. Worldview is certainly important. In both of those ways, this clandestine world is actually very qualitatively different from the world that we here live in. And I think that can qualify them in many important ways as a separate civilization, one that has broken away from our own.
The breakaway civilization seems to be a group of people, powerful people, that have influence over governments at very, very high level, way above the level of the presidency, or way above, you know, the science divisions. It seems there's an elite group of people with very, very much power who can decide historical events, and or who can control things when they happen, because they seem to have access to controlling the mainstream media. They seem to have access of influence in the educational system. And about 1947, at the I think the latest, we could go back, and if not earlier, there was a famous incident in America called the Roswell crash, which is one of the most well-documented cases of a crash of an alien vehicle in the desert of America near Roswell. And the materials that they found in this crash, including beings, was taken into secret bases, and they began a process which I think is responsible for why they have this technology to today, and that is the idea of reverse engineering advanced technologies. Now, if these beings that they found came from another planet or from another time, nobody knows, and it's not necessarily our desire to explain where they come from, but it's clear that there seems to be an input into society from a very advanced level of technology that gave them such a powerful technology that it's so far away from what we are told exists that nobody would really believe it exists. Just like if we were to go back 100 years with an iPhone and onto the streets of New York and began videotaping the people there on the street.
Nobody would believe it.
And they would think it's magic, you know. And the technology that the breakaway civilization works with is, you know, the teleporters, you know, the time travel machines, and the technology, the jump rooms that gets them to places in the universe or within our solar system, which we just cannot or will not believe because it's such a confrontation with everything we've learned. So that, and control of the media, and the use of the educational system, and the use of hiding what we call things into the public. You know, a lot of people felt Leslie Watkins was an agent for these elite who took the truth of this colony, wrote a fictional story, and put it into the mainstream. And when people read it, it was sold as science fiction, and everyone went, yeah, that's the great science fiction. But that couldn't be happening because we were told we haven't even gotten to the moon yet.
The truth behind.
And so they put the truth right in the open, and everyone thinks it's a crazy science fiction story. It makes you wonder about a lot of the sci-fi films.
It's like you write a novel, and then you can write whatever you want if you tell the truth.
Yes, you can write it. The truth is stranger than fiction.
I'm Andrew DiBasciago. I'm a lawyer in private practice in Washington State. I hold 5 academic degrees, including a Bachelor's of History from UCLA and a Master of Philosophy from the University of Cambridge. 10 years ago, I began investigating my experiences in DARPA's Project Pegasus in the late 1960s and early 1970s. I was a child participant in the early days of time-space exploration by the U.S. government. Project Pegasus was the real Philadelphia experiment. It was the U.S. time-space program at the time of its emergence. We were working with 2 technologies primarily to access past and future events. The first was a teleporter that was being developed from papers that Nikola Tesla had left at the time of his death in 1943.
Mr. Tesla, you were once a very wealthy man. You worked with J.P. Morgan, didn't you?
We were given a great opportunity.
And what was that opportunity?
It had to do with the course mankind has chosen and the one it might have chosen, which would have led in a very different direction.
We were regularly jumping through a device at the old Curtiss-Wright Aeronautical Company facility in Woodridge, New Jersey, and popping back into view on the grounds of the State Capitol Complex in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The experience of teleporting was almost emotionally overwhelming for a small child. We had jumped into a vortal tunnel that had been opened up in the fabric of time-space. As Jack Pruitt, one of the team leaders on Project Pegasus, once described it, the teleporter was creating an interstitial chasm in the fabric of time-space. So I found myself rushing forward seemingly at a great rate of speed, but also sometimes I felt I was falling downward, and sometimes I felt I wasn't moving at all. Really what was happening was, rather than the teleporter digitizing us, disintegrating us and then reintegrating us at the destination, it was wrapping the universe around us, and we were passing through to a new location on the Earth. When I would look to the side of the tunnel, I would see bands of light that were moving at an incredible rate of speed. And in them, I could see a multiplicity of events going on on other timelines, rapidly rushing past. And then after several seconds of that, we would see a light at the end of the tunnel. It would approach very quickly, as if it was going to hit us. And we would find footfall in New Mexico.
There's a lot of scientists, there's a lot of military whistleblowers, there's a lot of people now coming forward sharing their truth. And in doing that, a lot of technologies that are being disclosed, technologies that we thought until now could never exist, could not possibly be something that we're using, and it sounds total science fiction. When you get into time travel and teleportation and biolocation and some of the things that they're doing now, it's quite extraordinary.
We have people in the film talking about their experiences as whistleblowers.
If you talk the truth, it's dangerous today. I heard a week before a film, a song from Reinhard May. He's a famous songwriter in Germany. He, at the end of the song, he sings, "If you tell the truth, you need a very fast horse."
It's very true.
I mean, it's obviously, if you imagine with these rockets, they go to to the space. This is 70 years old, this technology.
Yes.
And I think it's like a game to waste tax money and all.
It's show business.
Hold us in hope, but not truth.
It's show business.
Show business.
The space program, as most people understand it, is completely a front. But the interesting part of that is that most of the scientists and engineers working in those projects don't realize they're part of a front. What happens is you could even call it the first tier of a filtering system.
There's credible testimony that human teleportation exists, that faster than light travel exists, that the ability exists to look through portals into a future time, to see probable future timelines.
There are definitely technologies that exist, and I know this for a fact right now, that could take our space program into a totally different direction, a much more advanced way of traveling. It doesn't even have to be jump rooms. It doesn't even have to be teleporters. There's technology now that can be developed, but there is a system in place which profits from the slow drip feeding of technology and resources to the rest of the unknowing masses, who are, of course, educated to believe within the limitations of their box, so that they become the good consumers, that they do not ask the questions. And so the truth is dangerous. The truth is even more dangerous because for those who are giving you pieces of the truth that can empower you to make decisions. Our stories, we put out things that is what is considered to be truthful by those we find who tell us their story. We want them to tell their truth in our films, and we don't want to filter and their truth. We want them to tell us their truth. If it's real or not, it doesn't necessarily matter so much, because
it's open for everybody to decide.
It's open for everybody to decide, and we want to put it on the public record and we want to put it on the record in a very cinematic and entertaining and beautiful way, because there's this mental barrier a lot of people have when they see a film on YouTube and it's very poor quality. They believe that it must be not real. It must be fake, because if it was true, somebody would, put something into it. And if, of course, this doesn't happen. So we think that if we can put a film out there, which for the first time, probably in German in speaking territory, goes in way down the rabbit hole into exopolitics in a way that only a film in Hollywood might do, but it's not fiction. It's a true story. The story that is being told by the whistleblowers, the researchers, the scientists, like Andrew Bishago, like Laura Eisenhower, like J.J. Hertog, Lucas Gantenborlo.
He came forward with some really original footage and information. Things like Project Red Sun that he shared, and we went into Apollo 19 and 20 missions in the film.
The Apollo 20 mission occurred in August 1976. They launched a modified Saturn V from the Vandenberg Air Force Base.
Roll complete and the pitch is programmed.
The Apollo 20 mission was a very difficult mission, first of all because they were on the far side of the moon, also because it was a very long mission. According to what they told me, it was a 7 days mission on the surface, 2 astronauts alone on the surface of the moon for 7 days. Both of the missions were American-Soviet programs. Apollo 19 has a crew composed by 2 American and 1 Soviet, a Russian cosmonaut. And also the Apollo 20 mission has a crew composed by 2 Americans. And the third one was a very famous Soviet cosmonaut, Alexei Leonov.
Did you have had any attacks against you because of the film? Because there's so much truth in this film. It's a hot device.
I'll let
hot
Tonia
thing, this
answer that one.
Film.
Well, we've had some. I'll be politically correct. We've had some difficult challenges to navigate around. We're definitely on the radar screen. But I think with all truths, I think it's just important that we stay on course and continue releasing the information because, as Frank shared, it's important to give everybody a voice. We're not the filter, we're simply the platform to let everybody speak their truth. We, even from a cinematic standpoint, we were always filming a lot of times when people had these incredible stories, we would get really tight into the eyes, into the face, so we could get into the soul of that story and the person telling that story, because the eyes are the window to the soul, and somebody's telling you their truth. We leave it to the audience whether they resonate with that or not. Because it's really, in the end, your truth as an observer.
They showed me images, things that they had recorded, and I don't know how it's possible, except, well, at the time I didn't know. Now I know that they can move through time as easily as we move from one room to the next. The technology that's used by the extraterrestrials is something that's here now on this world. To be able to move from point A to point B through a bidirectional wormhole, I can assure you, it's not only possible, but it's happening as we speak. It's out there.
You know, we told the people in the film, look, we're putting you on camera and we're going to be documenting this story and putting it out there for the whole world. So, you know, you have to take personal responsibility for everything that you tell us, you know, and that's why I believe that the people that we have in the film really are exploring their own truths in some ways. We had testimony from people in the film that never ever released the information to anybody
but
before.
Why can they talk on your film without getting any problems?
Well, we think that it has to do with the idea that the information is really so far out. I mean, you know, we thought we would never get any problems because nobody would believe it anyway. You know, they think, most people would think, you know, okay, they think they're on Mars, you know, but that was for a while our protection, and we also had another method. We thought we will never tell anybody about this film as we made it. We spent 5 years making this film in absolute silence. We didn't tell our family members or our friends or anybody or colleagues that we were making this film about this crazy subject. And we quietly brought it out. And it's interesting to observe that now that we've brought it out, and it won, you know, the People's Choice Award, and it's making a circling around the globe. People in Australia, where we met at Nexus, have seen it, and there was a sold-out screening in Sydney since then, and there's more screenings happening around the planet. It seems like all of a sudden the film is connecting, and now is the first time, as Tonia mentioned, that we're noticing some strange anomalies taking place, to stop, maybe to try and create some friction or interference with us continuing to bring the film out.
Packing for Mars is the question. If they once are on the Mars, what's going on? Do they stay forever, or would they come back to the Earth if there's everything okay again and everybody's disappeared?
Yeah,
what is
the Mars agenda And Alternative 3, of course, never defines this back and forth. They kind of say, we're going there to establish this colony, and they don't really get into the topic of, coming back to Earth or when or how. What's interesting about what we learned from some of the people in the film is that they actually have the technology, on the one hand, to carry large equipment and large amounts of and heavy weights to the planet, in like what we consider freighters, space freighters. But on the other hand, they have technology which allows a one or two or a small group of people to enter almost like an elevator, like you would go into an elevator and click a button, and then minutes later you're at the location in Mars, and you're able to have lunch there, as one of the people in our film very comically states, and then come back again to Earth, in a flash. You're back here again after having lunch there.
There were two great discoveries of the last century in quantum mechanics. One was the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, and the second was quantum non-locality and quantum teleportation.
What did he say it was? He said they're not called stargates.
Jump gates.
Jump gates.
Jump
No.
gates.
He said they're jump rooms. He said they're jump rooms.
In case you're not following this, a jump gate is allegedly a stable, traversable wormhole between two locations, which works whenever you want to go.
So, apparently there seems to be this ability to go technologically, but we also wanted to explore not just this idea of a colony there now, because Mars seems to have a correlation with planet Earth that goes back hundreds or thousands of years. There's 369 words of the English language that are based around Mars, and all of these words that are happening on the planet are seeming to talk about great cataclysms or very intense, emotional, or powerful things that took place on the planet. And from what we learned from J.J. Hertog and some of his paleoarchaeological work, is that there definitely is lining up of places on Earth that line up with places on Mars. There are structures on Mars that are seemingly directly related to a pyramid culture that goes back into our antiquity of our times, including language, mathematics, and alignments. So there seems to be a cultural connection between the Earth and Mars that goes way back before recorded history, which is very fascinating. So the idea of a connection with Mars seems to be inherent in our whole culture.
According to Arab historians, the time the foundations of the city of Cairo were laid, there was a special orientation with Mars. And why do we have, even in the New Testament of our Bible, a reference by the Apostle Paul on Mars Hill to the Greek philosophers, suggesting that they take a look at what could be called the temples of the gods in Greek mythology or Greek legend? Certain alignments and aerial perspectives were specifically there in Egypt with respect to Mars, with the traditions of the Zulu people in East Africa, with the traditions of the peoples of the Orient, and certainly with the peoples of Central and South America, all who are, should we say, proclaiming the fact that we need to take a second look at Mars and recognize that something happened there that connected the earlier mythology, intellectual history, and cosmology of ancient civilization with this mysterious sister planet.
I think there must be parallel technology that let's say you can go by spiritually to somewhere else, and you leave your body here.
Ingo Swann.
And you have the information of your body within your spirit, and then you can materialize again somewhere else. Otherwise, it's impossible, because there's a light speed and the mass, which is going to be very more heavy and heavier. You can't go faster than light speed.
Right. Well, you're talking about something which often is referred to as remote viewing, which was developed by the CIA and starting in the 60s. In particular, one of the characters was Ingo Swann, who has a famous history in dealing with the CIA and doing some of this remote viewing. Remember that story about him having transported his senses to the moon?
It's interesting. Packing for Mars was 5 years in the making, and since we had started making the film, throughout the whole journey, there's been a lot of military whistleblowers and even individuals, private individuals that have come forward. I know some of the more well-known whistleblowers are Corey Good and Randy Kramer, which we touch upon in the film with Michael Sala, and the technologies that they were using and they were involved with, sometimes in 30-year missions. Michael Sala did a recent presentation at Nexus talking about how even with these programs, they were age digressing these commanders, sergeants, military personnel in their missions. And we had talked about this before, but they were using these time travel technologies to actually conceal the time travel programs themselves. And then you have the remote viewing aspect with Ingo Swann. The military is involved with a lot of technologies, different levels of technologies, and it's interesting when you had asked about, how long will they stay there? Will they come back? Laura Eisenhower brings up a really good point in Packing for Mars, and that is we really need to focus here on Earth. With all the issues we have, this is the planet. This is our planet. We came here for a reason. And I think the focus in the end really needs to be about here, not what's out there, or how long do we stay, or do we come back here, or do we go out there, or if that's a no arc plan.
The choice not to go to Mars is more the commitment to stay on Earth and balance these energies here on this planet before we really journey into the stars and onto other planets, is to establish a peaceful world first before we go and make the same mistakes somewhere else. It's like the thought of going to Mars was like a death. It was, like separation anxiety from the mother. And the feeling was so strong in me that these colonies that have been there were created as a diversion to the highest potential we have here on Earth. There's just no reason to go anywhere else. We'll keep running from one problem and creating it somewhere else if we don't do it right here, right now. And we owe this to our planet. We owe this to our mother.
I think that's a solution for both. These guys, they want to go to the Mars. They can go. We have freedom on Earth. I think that's like a purification of the system.
Send them on.
Send them on. People. Everybody can go. I would stay alone with a few people here and then live a fantastic life here in health and freedom. Why not?
Absolutely.
Those people, they are the people. They make problems. That's the problem.
You could say that very much. Yeah.
What is the conclusion of the film? Well, we're coming close to the end of our interview.
I mean, the conclusion, I think, the film will take you down an incredible and wild ride and expose you to some things that might deeply disturb you in some ways and should. But I think the conclusion is that, we're in a process of waking up all over the planet, and the lines have been drawn. Those people who want to stay in the box are staying in the box, and those people who no longer can buy into the system of ideologies and beliefs and technology that we've been trained to accept are breaking away, and they're waking up, and they're sharing information, and they're putting out the signals and the frequencies that will bring us hopefully into more of an enlightened, time on the planet. And I think these cycles and these phases have been predicted by even, like we talk about in Solar Revolution with the Maya, the galactic, the Hunab Ku, the ray from the center of the galaxy, which will awaken us.
The Mayas.
Right. I mean, maybe nobody knows. Nobody knows, But I think that we're in that. There's a as they say, predicted time where we will wake up on the planet and move into a new level of consciousness. And it's almost, whether it's a timeline or whether it's people that will disappear or die off, who knows? I don't really want to define that. I don't think we really want to define that, but we wanted to create a film which will maybe cause you to question your version of reality a little bit, and if it's done that and made you maybe confront some things which may not be true, then we've already made a positive impact.
What was the intention to produce the film also in German language?
We were invited to talk and about it in front of another German station, and we didn't. We thought, okay, and we had presented it in Salzburg in its original English language at the Mozart University,
one of the oldest theaters.
And so they invited us to come and talk about it, and we talked about it. And amazingly, the next day after they released our interview, there were over, tens of thousands of people that watched this interview. So we thought, oh my God, there's a lot of German friends out there.
And we did Solar Revolution in German and
we
French.
did Solar Revolution in German and French, and we thought, this information obviously needs to be put out into the German language because the German people seem to be hungry for it, and there may be a very important, maybe the German-speaking territory is a critical collective mind that is going to help push, and participate in steering us into this age of enlightenment.
More open here than, let's say, in America.
America is becoming closed and it's becoming policed, and more. Isn't the free America that it was in the 50s? It's become this militant, almost controlled, and FEMA and whatever else, Homeland Security.
Which is nothing else than a signal of fear about the people.
Absolutely.
That's because they must hold them under control,
yes.
And they don't get all the informations.
Well, the good news in America, though, too, is that a lot of this information is getting out. And they have a lot of conferences, there are a lot of radio shows, there are a lot of television shows, there's a lot of webisodes. And so I think it's really important to be spreading this information around the world, like in Europe and in Australia, and branching it out into other languages. There are many great, even authors here in Germany that are not known in the States, and vice versa. So I think it's really important now to get the message globally, even in South America and other parts of the world. So
I mean, the more pressure you give to somebody, the more you get pressure against you. That's probably the problem. They don't see. You should do something for something and not against. The more they hide something, the more we get interested in what's in the background, what's behind. That's
absolutely.
Where we can get the film, or where we can get it and watch it.
The URL is www.packingformarsmovie.com, and we actually have the English website, and there's a German
you can watch it on the website, or you can buy the DVD.
Or you can buy the DVD in both English and German, and you can see there's a website is both English and German, and the German extension is /de at the end of the .com. We make the film available in multiple formats on Reelhouse and on Amazon.
As much as you can.
Yeah, and like us on Facebook and spread the message. Yeah.
I wish you success with these two films and whatever you do in the future. Thank you for coming to Forst, to the TV station of the Alpenparlament. Tonia and Frank, thank you for coming, and all the best.
Thank you.
Goodbye. And thank you for joining us on the TV, and we see you next time. Thank you.
That's good, 9/11! 9/11 was the new side job!